Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 30-Minute Gospel. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host as we open and study the Bible together. I'll be reading from the King James Version, but you can feel free to read whichever translation that best suits you. I would just recommend that you have a version that does not delete verses from God's holy word. Each video will be a biblical teaching of 30 minutes or less. My material is completely 100% free, so you can share these videos with family members, co-workers, friends, or anyone you know who either needs to hear the Word of God or wants to study it in a casual setting. The gospel is free to all, so I will not accept any donations, gifts, or beg viewers for money. Please give to your local church or a Christian organization of your choosing. You can reach out to me with questions or comments at 30minutegospel@gmail.com, but please keep your message respectful and cordial. Well, welcome again, everybody, to the 30-Minute Gospel. We are going to start a new series. And this series is going to be one that may trigger some people because we're going to teach God's truth on this. Okay, and what I mean by triggering people is the fact that some of these verses are misused by all sorts of different Christian denominations, be it Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, Charismatics, uh, Catholics. There's a lot of these verses that are going to be misread. I am just going to read straight from the word. That is my philosophy. I always tell people I am non-denominational really. I usually attend Baptist churches because they're the closest aligned with me. But not all the time do I agree with them. I agree with whatever this word says. Whatever this word says, it's just like I say, I did a whole series on health. I believe in the biblical teaching on health, on the way we should be eating. Okay? That aligns with the Seventh-day Adventists, you know. That really aligns with the Seventh-day Adventists, you know. I believe in divine healing. That kind of resonates more with the charismatic and Pentecostals because the Bible, I believe, teaches that the gifts of the Spirit, I think, are still here. Okay, and some may disagree with me. That's fine. But you see, I go with what the Bible says, what it says. When it says anoint somebody's head with oil, I believe a church should do that. That's just me. When it talks about baptism, I believe that's underwater, and there's no such thing as infant baptism because there's nothing in the Bible that says that. So these are sort of the things. So we're going to go through. This is what we're going to call. I'm calling these the most misused Bible verses in the Bible. And when I mean misused, I mean they are misused by all sorts of groups and they don't mean what they mean. And we're going to go through some of these verses. Some of these verses you're going to know. Okay? And so we're going to dig right in here and we're going to read starting off with Matthew 7:1. So if you will go with me in your Bibles to Matthew. We're going to start with that verse. And there's many verses in here. Let me see, how many do I have? 14 of them. So I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 videos it might take to get through this. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 7. This verse says this. Y'all have heard this one before. Judge not, let ye be not judged. Okay? Or what? And this verse is mainly misused by people outside the church. Okay? And also it is misused by certain progressive Christians to promote the sinful lifestyles of people in society and what they're doing. So they use that, say, judge not lest you be judged. Okay, you hear that all the time, and if it's taken out of context, see, this is a lot of them take this out of context. When it's taken out of context like this, it can seem like what it's saying is you should not judge, but we know that's not true. People make judgments all the time. Okay, we make judgments all the time. What am I having for dinner tonight? Where am I going to go? Moe's or Jersey Mike's. Let's just use that as an example. Well, I'm going to have to make a judgment. I make a judgment, a choice, a judgment. I make a judgment that I want to go to Moe's, and then I have to make a judgment. People ask me, well, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Moe's or Chipotle's? Well, I have to make a judgment there. I have to judge whether or not I want to do business with somebody. Guy wants to come by my house and power wash my house, for example. I have to make a judgment of which company do I want to go to, which one does a better job. I have to make judgments like that all the time. Where do I want to send my kids to school? I have to judge something. We always have to judge. After my kids are at a school, I have to judge the school and determine if that's the place my kids should stay. We make judgments all the time. All the time. That's just, you say judge not in a, basically what a lot of these people do, especially the atheists, and they use this for the same sex group of people. It's like they say judge not. You should not judge people. You just don't, they don't want people judging people's behavior. Okay? But that's not what it says. They just take that out of context. They don't continue to read. If you can, you have to read the whole section. It says in Matthew chapter 7 verses 2, after verse 1, it says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." In verses 2 through 5, people don't continue to read. It says, "For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote of the brother's eye." Okay, so what is that saying? It's the very famous saying. It's saying, how can you judge somebody for something if you are carrying a greater sin than the same sin, or even a greater sin than they are? Okay, so for example, if you see somebody being lazy, being slothful, that's bad. You sit there and say, let's just say you have a friend. You go, how can you be that lazy while you're committing adultery on your wife? That's what it's saying, is you're criticizing this guy for being lazy while you're committing adultery on your wife. You have a bigger sin problem than this person does. That's a greater sin, because sin is sin to God, is God. So all of it's missing the mark. But it is true, there are sins that are judged greater than others. If you kill somebody, it was a life for a life. If you committed adultery, it was a life for a life. But if you stole, you just had to return and get and return and then add a fifth to it. Is what it says in the Bible. Or if you do certain other things, it's only a payment of shekels to the treasury or to that person. There was retribution that had to be made, but there were certain sins where it was death. So God did distinguish between greater sins and smaller sins. All sin keeps you short of the glory of God and sends you to hell. It's not saying that, but in this life, and we do that too. I mean, if somebody steals from a business, they may get a couple years in prison, but if somebody kills somebody, they could be executed. So we recognize that, and God recognizes it as well. But what it's saying here is that you're pointing out all these other people's smaller sin when you have a greater sin in your life. And then Jesus is saying, what, clean up that sin in your own life, and then when you do that, then you can best help your neighbor if they have a problem. You see, if they have that, if they're slothful, if you're committing adultery, basically saying, don't commit adultery anymore, stop what you're doing and get right with God and get right with man, and then help your brother. Okay? Because why? It's going to hurt your witness. It damages your witness with somebody. If you're telling somebody, don't do this when you're doing it, I have seen Christians who have been terrible witnesses for Christ. They're pleading with family members, please come back to Christ, do this and do that, while they aren't attending church or or doing works, at the church, or living by example of being Christ-like. You can't do that, okay? But people judge all the time. You see, it's what he's saying is he's telling you how to judge, not to judge. Okay, that's what this verse is saying. He's telling you how to judge. Is what you do is you clean up your act first. You see, I use this as an example. If I saw somebody I knew committing adultery, I'm best to talk to that person about what they're doing is wrong, because I am not committing adultery on my wife. Does that make sense? But if I was committing adultery on my wife and I had a friend who was committing adultery on his wife, how can I speak to that person? I can't. I can't tell them what they're doing is wrong in the sight of God, because I'm doing the exact same thing. Okay? So that hurts my witness. Or even if I'm committing adultery on my wife and I've got an unbeliever, how can I sit there and tell this unbeliever, you need to get right with Christ, when I'm committing adultery on my wife? It hurts your witness. And so God says, if you're judging the people in small things like that, what's going to happen, with you if you have greater sins? Jesus tells a similar story about the guy who owed the money, to he owed the money to he owed the money to his landlord, or whatever, to his lender or something, and he was begging and pleading from the guy, and the guy said, "Okay, I relieve you of this debt." And the debt was like, I can't remember how much, but we'll just say it was like 100 gallons of olive oil or something like that. If you read the story, I'd have to find it. And then the guy goes, okay, so then he goes out and sees somebody who only owes him like 5 gallons of olive oil, and he tells that guy, he's like, you pay it back now, and he sends him to debtor's prison. He sends him to prison because he wouldn't pay him. And then the owner that he owed 100 gallons of olive oil to, called him in and said, "What are you doing?" That's basically, he's judging somebody. You see, he had a greater problem, but he's picking out this other person's problem. Does that make sense? And Jesus is saying you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to have. He should have been as generous to the guy that owed him 20 gallons of olive oil as the lender was to him. You see, that's the point. You judge not, lest ye be judged. So you got to get you've got to get the log out of your own eye before you can pull the speck out of your brother's. Okay? And there's several other verses that talk about this. If you go to Luke 7, so we'll go to Luke 7. All right, 7:43. If you go to Luke 7, verse 43, it says this. It says, Simon answered and said, let's go back. This is what Jesus said. There was a certain in verse 41, it says, there was a certain creditor which had two debtors. The one owed 500 pence and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said, talking about Jesus, said unto Simon, Thou hast rightly judged. You has rightly judged. God says it right there. Jesus says it. He judged correctly. We make judgments all the time. So judge not, lest ye be judged, cannot mean if you take in the Bible in the whole, in the verses and some of the other verses, cannot mean what the unbelieving world wants it to mean. Okay? There's other examples of this. Luke 12:57. Okay, if you go to Luke 12 and then verse 57, it says this. It says, yea, and why, Jesus speaking, says, yea, and why even of yourselves judge ye not what is right. So he's telling you have to judge what is right and wrong. So he's telling it again. You have to judge what's right and wrong. John 7:24. Okay, John 7, it says, John 7:24, Jesus talking, he says, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So he's saying make a correct judgment. Don't just judge on appearance, make a correct judgment. So God is telling us we have to make judgments all the time, but he's telling us how to judge. He's telling us not to judge with partiality, not judge somebody and be hypocrites in our judgment, but to judge correctly, to judge righteously. That is what God is saying. So he's not telling them to not judge. He's telling them how to judge. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. We have to make judgments all the time. Jesus tells them, you've made a correct judgment. Make a right judgment. You know, he's telling them what to do so that they can judge correctly. He's not telling them not to ever judge, period. And like I said, a lot of the pagan world wants to use this term, judge not lest ye be judged, to justify, to try to throw it back at us, just like when they say, and I'm going to talk about this, they say money is the love is the money of it, love the no money is the root of all evil. They don't get that right, and it's right here they don't get it right as well. They're telling us they're using that to throw back at us so that they'll silence us up by taking the Bible out of context. But let me tell you something, Satan took the Bible out of context. He did it against Jesus. So they're just using the same tactic that Satan used to get to Jesus. All right. So the next verse we're going to talk about, this one's going to make a lot of people mad because I know a lot of people have this verse memorized. They have it on T-shirts, on bracelets. They have it on decorative picture frames in their houses, or little knickknacks. You've heard this all the time. And it's Jeremiah 29:11. Some of you guys can repeat that, but I'm going to go right to Jeremiah. Some of you can just say exactly what it says, like right out of the box. You know it by heart because it's everywhere. So Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." Some people have heard it goes, "For I know the plans I have for you, saith the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and beautiful future." Some of you have heard it said that way, okay? I read out of the King James Version, but the thing is that this is used a lot by the prosperity people as well, and or as you call it, the name it and claim it. It's used by lots of people. Lots of people quote that, and maybe God does have a beautiful plan for everybody, but I just try to tell everybody you can't use this verse as your backup for it. Okay, you cannot use this verse as your backup for it, because this verse has nothing to do with believing Christians. It has nothing to do. It's in the Old Testament. Now, some of the verses have to deal with us. The Ten Commandments, for example. There's a lot in there that has to deal with us. I'm just using the Ten Commandments, future prophecies of Jesus' return. Things like that, how to live a righteous life, these sorts of things. But Jeremiah 29:11 cannot mean that. See, a lot of them say, see, God has got a wonderful plan for you. He's giving you a hope and a beautiful future. Well, the issue is that this verse isn't about Christians. Chapter 29 has nothing to do with Christians. There are some truths in it, okay? But this is not dealing with that, because you have to read Jeremiah 29 verses 1 through 4. This is where the chapter starts with, okay? So we're going to read Jeremiah 29 verses 1 through 4, and it says this. It says, "Now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders which were in which were carried away captives, to the priests and to the prophets and to all the people from whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. So we can already stop right there. Who is this? Now these are the words of Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders. This was sent to who? The people Nebuchadnezzar carried away. Who were the people Nebuchadnezzar carried away? Those were Jews, okay, that were being held captive in Babylon. Okay, so these words were written to who? The Jews carried away in Babylon, not to Christians. Okay, now verse 2 says, after that Jeconiah the king and the queen and the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, and the carpenters and the smiths were departed from Jerusalem by the hand of Eliasaph the son of Shaphan and Jeremiah the son of Hilkiah, whom Zedekiah king of Judah sent unto Babylon to Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that are carried away captives, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem unto Babylon. So this chapter is dealing with the Jews that were carried away to Babylon, not dealing with Christians since Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, and the formation of the church in by Acts chapter 2. Okay, it's not dealing with this. It says it's dealing with those carried away. Okay, so what is God telling them? He says, I know the plans I have for you. Who? The nation of Israel, the people in captivity. I know the plans I have for you. Plans to bring you back to the land, to give you hope in a beautiful future. That's who he's talking to, not Christians. Okay, so he's talking to the Jews there. He says, I know the plans I have for you. I'm going to bring you out. Basically, he's like, I'm going to bring you out. Okay, I will bring you out. Now, let me tell you this. There are some truths to this. It says, it's in verses 12 and 13. Now, these verses right here are actually true. I'm going to read these ones. It says in Jeremiah 29:12, there is some truth to this. It says, then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. God still does that. If you pray to God, God will do that. Why do we know that? Because Jesus says that. But Jesus never says, I have a great plan for you. Plans to prosper you, not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a beautiful future. He doesn't say that. But it says, you shall call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. Okay? And it says, and ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search me for all of your heart, and I will be found of the Lord, or I will be found of you, saith the Lord. You see, that's a truth. What does Jesus say? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So you have to love the Lord with all of your heart. Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens up, I will come in and sup with them. So when you seek him, you have to seek him. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. You see, you have to seek God with your own heart. That's actually a truth. Okay? And when you pray unto him, God answers. That's actually a truth. But there's nothing repeated in the New Testament that I am going to give you a prosperous life. It doesn't say that. It says in the book, it says in the book of 3 John, it says, brethren, I wish upon all things that you shall prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. It says, I wish. It doesn't say you will. This says, I know the thoughts I have for you, thoughts of peace and not evil, things to give you hope and a beautiful future. You see, he had a plan for them to bring them back in captivity. The other one says, I wish above all things. Meaning that prosperity and stuff like that is not necessarily guaranteed by God. It says, I wish upon all things. It doesn't say, I know that you will. Okay? So this verse is not, you cannot use this verse to say God has a wonderful plan for your life. And just to finish up on this, if you actually read it, nobody ever reads this chapter. It says, if you go to Jeremiah 44:11 through 12, nobody has this quoted on there. It says this in Jeremiah 44:11 through 12. It says, therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will set my face against you for evil, and to cut off all of Judah, and I will take the remnant of Judah, and have set their faces to go into the land of Egypt to sojourn there, and they shall all be consumed, and all fall in the land of Egypt. They shall even be consumed by the sword and by famine. They shall die from the least unto the greatest, by the sword and by the famine, and they shall be an execration and an astonishment and a curse and a reproach. You see, it says there, it says, well, there, thus saith the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, behold, I will set my face against you for evil, and to cut off all of Judah. Well, they don't claim that verse. They don't claim that verse. They said, well, that was talking about the Jews. So was Jeremiah 29:11. So was Jeremiah, because this verse is true. It doesn't have anything to do with you. You can't claim that verse because it's dealing with Judah. That's what this chapter is. It says in Jeremiah chapter 44 and verse 1, it says, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews which dwell in the land of Egypt, which dwell at Migdol and at Tapanis and at Noph and in the country of Pathros. You see, this is talking about the Jews, just like Jeremiah 29 was talking about the Jews. So those verses, this one where he says he's going to cut off, that doesn't deal with Christians. And one where he says, I will give you a hope and a beautiful future, that's not dealing with Christians. It's dealing with the nation of Israel. Okay? Now, I know that verse is going to anger some people because a lot of people have it everywhere. I've got it on a plaque in my house. I know I bought it. It's a nice plaque. It's a beautiful plaque. We have it still hanging. I just don't believe it. But it's a beautiful plaque, and it's a beautiful Bible verse. But I don't judge on that. Like I said, you may believe that you do. Like if you want to believe 3 John chapter or verse 2 where it says, brethren, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in good health even as your soul prospers. Yeah, I can see someone making a case on that for using that God has a good life plan for you. Okay, fine, but you can't use Jeremiah 29:11 for a basis because that verse has nothing to do with you. 3 John verse 2 has something to do with you because that verse was written to Christians. Okay, believing Christians at that time at the church. This was not. So you can't claim that verse, Jeremiah 29:11. I know a lot of people like to claim it. It's such a nice verse that they want to, but it's just not true. Okay? And so we've gotten through 2 of the 14 verses, so we'll see how long this takes to get through this. I thank you all again for tuning in, and I just like to remind you, if you'd like to, just like the video, subscribe to the channel. I usually like to produce videos once a week. I didn't last week. I got a little busy. But I'm going to continue back on that. I also have a video. Share this video with anybody you like. I have a video on my on my YouTube and Rumble channels. It's called Peace with God, the third, or the Gospel Message. Please share that with anybody you know who does not know God, because we need to get this out as soon as possible. I think the time is running short, so please get that to somebody you know. I also have a Facebook page, 30-Minute Gospel with Chris. You can like and follow that. And also I've got email, 30minutegospel@gmail, if you'd like to reach out to me. I thank you all again for tuning in, and I will leave you all with this. Remember these words, just as Theodore Roosevelt once said, a thorough knowledge of the Bible is worth more than a college education. God bless you all.